So apparently, Aaron Rodgers trading to the Steelers is now a thing again because everyone's talking about it. And really, it only comes from one source that it's kind of like it's a little questionable if it's even going to happen. I'm going to talk about the possibility of it happening, what it would take, and what the cost would be, and whether it's worth it getting, a guy who's been back-to-back MVP and one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time for his limited window versus what the Steelers are trying to build that's going to last them a lot longer. Weighing that back and forth is going to be an interesting conversation. But also, there was an exciting NFL scouting combine this weekend. We're going to talk about draft prospects that we see out of that. And it's Mock Draft Monday. So we're going to talk about who won Mock Draft Monday. Go over your picks right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Joining me will be Jeff Hartman of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, one of my old buddies. If you've been following me for a long time, you know Jeff and I go way back. So we're going to do that right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Odyssey. You can also find the show on YouTube. If you're enjoying this video, hit the like button on our video. Hit the subscribe button for all of our daily content on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We thank you for making us your first podcast listen every day. This show is also brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before, whether it's basketball, hockey, baseball, or even the NFL draft or the NFL combine. Go to BetOnline.net where the game starts to place your bets down today. Joining me today is an old friend of mine, Jeff Hartman from BehindTheSteelCurtain.com and all their large podcasting platform. He's got the Ride or Die crew. He does all of the great things. Jeff, welcome back to the show, my friend. How you been?
Been great. It's been a long time since we talked. It's been like about a week since you were on my show. But no, it's good to be here. Great. I like I've always said on my show, this is the only podcast I plug outside of our network. And so the Locked On Steelers podcast, man, it's good to be back with you.
Same here. It's great to see you, Jeff, and great to talk with you. I wanted to talk to you about Aaron Rodgers because this was being a person who has to write about the Steelers and has to keep up with the times and everything else. We both saw just the explosion on social media that happened when this thing came out. Now, I want everyone to understand this whole Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers thing, again, only started because Pro Football Talk and Mike Florio and that outlet wrote a story that said that Aaron Rodgers, there might be some trades. And a source says that Aaron Rodgers has trades in place or agreements with other teams in the AFC. And among those teams were the Broncos, the Titans, and also the Steelers. And it was made to think like, oh, wow, well, the Steelers are like in play. Like they have a trade ready lined up for him. That story was refuted by several Packers writers who were like, the Packers haven't even given him permission to talk to other people yet. So that hasn't even occurred. So what you're hearing is just pure speculation. But fine, Jeff, let's go with pure speculation. Could this happen? The Steelers bringing in Aaron Rodgers. That's what I want to get you thought. The Steelers bringing in Aaron Rodgers. Is this, a lot of people think this is the cure-all. This is it. You do this right now, they're Super Bowl contenders. Jeff, if they're going to be Super Bowl contenders with Aaron Rodgers, why wouldn't they do
it? They're not Super Bowl contenders with Aaron Rodgers. He is a great quarterback, and I'm not saying anything about him on the football field. He's remarkable. Mm-hmm. He is remarkable. There's no way around it. But the one thing you have to keep in mind is, and I think a lot of fans, you get enamored with the name. And this is true when we talk about offensive line coach. It wasn't the name. It wasn't the name Munchak that they knew. But, some of these young quarterbacks they're not sure about in the draft, these free agents that are floating around. I think a lot of times people even forget that Aaron Rodgers is not a free agent. This is not going to be the highest bidder gets him. This is a trade. And therefore, the Steelers would have to give up a massive amount of draft stock and then also eat into a lot of their salary cap space if they were to even entertain this hypothetical situation coming to fruition. And for me, I said this on Twitter, I think you were tagged in the same thread, was the Steelers have so many other not options. They have so many other issues. That's the way to put it. That Aaron Rodgers is not a cure-all. He's going to make some plays. He's definitely going to make the offense better. But if you're talking about winning now, anyone with 2 eyes and a brain knows that offensive line is not a win now offensive line. Like, this isn't even 2003 when you just felt like all they needed was a quarterback, and they get that quarterback in 2004 and Ben Roethlisberger. He leads them to a 15-1 season. They don't win that year, but they win the next year.
Right.
This isn't that lineup. This isn't that roster. The defense is good. I wouldn't even say that they're great at this point. So you can't really hang your hat on that and say, well, they'll take care of everything. They've got a lot of issues on that side of the ball too. If this was a team, an organization, and a roster that they felt was one quarterback away, then I would say, you know what, if you want to sell the farm and do an LA Rams and try to win it all this year, I might be on board. But I don't feel like this roster is that roster right now. You might disagree. I don't think you do. I think we're on the same page.
No,
but a lot of people think that, and I'm just like, gosh, think about what's happening on the offensive line and the players they have under contract and the offense and the receiving core. It's just not ready. It's not ready for that, in my opinion.
And this is one of the counters that I always hear to that is, well, look at the Bengals. They had a Joe Burrow, and he had a bad offensive line, and they made it to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, okay, yes, but that's Joe Burrow. He's in his early to mid 20s. Like he's Aaron Rodgers is 38. He will be 39. In the middle of the next season. You're talking about a guy who's right at Roethlisberger's age, definitely in better shape than Ben. Like he's more mobile. He can throw on the run still, and he still has his arm. So I mean, I'm not refuting that, and I'm not saying that the Steelers wouldn't be better with Aaron Rodgers than if they would be with, say, Mason Ruff, Mitch Trubisky, and whoever. Neither Jeff and I are saying that, but you're committing multiple first round picks, and I don't care what anybody says. They're like, oh, you could get him for less than that. I'm sorry. Why would the Packers give him up for anything less than multiple firsts when they know that their window is right now? There is no doubt that if they lose him out, I don't care about Jordan Love. They're like, we got to win now. Otherwise, there is a rebuild coming a lot faster than we'd like. But they want those picks. So you're going to give up $26 million in cap space plus multiple first round picks in a year where you're losing 2 starting cornerbacks. You still need another linebacker to go with Devin Bush. You still need to wonder if Devin Bush is the answer. You're still worried about Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Alualu being 100%, which means you need to replenish your defensive line. You still don't have a starting strong safety because Terrell Edmonds isn't under contract. You still need to re-sign Minkah Fitzpatrick to make sure that he's going to be around long term. And you need to figure out what the heck's going on in your offensive line. That's a lot of picks and a lot of money that you need to fix those things. And if you get Aaron Rodgers right now, sure, you will have one of the best cornerbacks in the league, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He will be able to launch the ball all over the place. And I guarantee you, they will be competitive. But that competitive window will be small at best. It'll be 1 to 2 years. And on top of it just being 1 to 2 years, next year when we're doing this all over again, you see what Aaron Rodgers has put the Packers fans through and the Packers organization through for the past 4 years. Get rid of Mike McCarthy. Okay, we did that. Matt LaFleur, you got to make some more changes. Okay, we got you more weapons. Okay, that still wasn't enough. And now here we are for the 4th straight year. Aaron Rodgers being like, I don't know if I want to stick around and agree, but do you want to deal with that next year? And again, stop yourself from having first round picks in a year where you're probably going to get a pretty good talent to fall down to you 20. And then you're also probably talking about next year's class and maybe missing out on that boatload of quarterbacks where you get CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Brennan Armstrong, and a bunch of other big names. Jeff, it just seems to me that doing this, it does make you competitive. It does say like, hey, you can fight with Aaron Rodgers. You could probably win a good amount of games, but it is a small window in a 1 to 2 year window whereas if you keep building the defense, if you make an elite defense and make a good offensive line and build the fortress so that when you add your franchise quarterback next year, you have maybe a 5 to 8 year window, maybe who knows what kind of a window you're going to have, but it would be a lot longer than 1 to 2 years with Aaron Rodgers, and you haven't mortgaged anyone's future.
The Steelers rarely play the short game. They are a long game organization. They want to make the decision that's going to be best for them in the long term. And signing Aaron Rodgers and mortgaging your entire future is not their MO. And everyone wants to point to the 2019 trade with the Miami Dolphins, the first round. I mean, you listen to Art Rooney II talk. That literally pained him to send away a first round pick. Now, no one's asking to redo that trade, but that was one first round pick. And it took some convincing for them to send that pick to Miami. But you bring up Joe Burrow because that's a common thread on social media. People say, well, look at Joe Burrow. You bring in a quarterback. Well, what happened with Joe Burrow? A, they didn't win the Super Bowl. Let's keep that in mind. A lot of things went their way to get there. And B, what happened when they got there? The dude was harassed the entire postseason. I
Yep.
mean, he was sacked. What the Tennessee Titans got him nine times?
9 times?
Yeah, 9 times. And in the Super Bowl, what was he sacked 6 or 7 times?
6
I
or
think?
7. I mean, it was their undoing.
Exactly.
And another thing here, Jeff, Joe Burrow also wasn't the guy who carried the Bengals through the playoffs. That was the defense, and they could only afford to have their defense. Why? Because he's on a rookie contract. Which Aaron Rodgers is not going to have you on.
This is a tough spot for a lot of Steeler fans because it's almost like they have to be willing to say, I'm going to bite the bullet and admit that I'm going to be okay with the team just being competitive for a year or two, but then have them be legitimate Super Bowl contenders. And that's tough for me to say as a fan as well, because you want your team. And let's be honest, we've been very spoiled the last 18 years with Ben Roethlisberger. Every year when training camp rolled around, you were thinking, hey, this is a year we could win it all. And this is the first year since 2005, let's be honest, because no one thought in 2004 we'd see what we did out of Roethlisberger. No. And since 2005 that we're all sitting here thinking, well, we don't know. We have no clue. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, we're not sure. And so that uncertainty leads people to want some form of certainty. And Aaron Rodgers is, well, if there's one thing he's certain with, he's going to make you competitive. He's going to make you a good team, but he's not going to give you, in my opinion, a Super Bowl just by coming on the roster. The roster needs to be better. They have a lot of questions that they need to answer on that roster. And I agree with you 100%. Aaron Rodgers is not the cure-all. I don't think there's any truth to this rumor whatsoever.
That on top of all of it, this is just malarkey.
This is literally just hypothetical talk. I don't think there's any truth to this, and I don't blame the fans for kind of buying into it. It's a media-driven thing,
and it's fans. Fans are they're here to buy into everything and be like, see the hope for their team at all times.
Yeah, but I think the hope is in the future. The hope is not in the now. The hope for this Steelers team is that they have a good core nucleus and they're going to build around it, whether that's TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Najee Harris now. You just build around that nucleus, and I think it's going to take some time. It's going to be some awkward years. You hope they can still be competitive, maybe make the postseason. But at the same time, I just don't think jeopardizing your future is the right move right now.
Right. I was going to switch to the combine in the second segment, but there's a lot more to unpack with this conversation. I want to keep unpacking that with Jeff Hartman here, because I think that this is a very relevant conversation to all the things we've heard, even beyond just Aaron Rodgers, what the Steelers have to do right now to make this to start building a more complete roster. We'll talk about that in just a second here. But first, I got to talk to you guys about Built Bar. It's that time of the year people start to give up on their New Year's resolutions, and it's only March? Get back on it, and what can help you get back on it is Built Bar. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, and it tastes so good it helps you stick with your diet New Year's resolutions. Have you tried the new Puffs flavors? If you haven't, you're missing out, because Built Bar has some of the best tasting bars around, and those Puff flavors are right up there. The Puff flavors are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, marshmallowy, and not just a protein bar, they're a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in flavors like cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. You can also get the regular Built Bars that are also covered in 100% real chocolate, and any Built Bars, including the Puffs, they're averaging around 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, but are packing 17 grams of protein. That's a huge step in the healthy direction compared to the average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. And there's so many flavors for you to choose from. Even if you don't want to try the Puffs, they have the regular Built Bars, like coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, double chocolate, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, minted brownie, all those flavors available when you go to Built.com. So go to Built.com, order your favorite flavors of Built Bars delivered right to your door, and when you do so, be sure to enter the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order of Built Bars when you visit Built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jeff Hartman of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Jeff, so like I said, we were going to switch to more combine talk, but I forget that, man. I'm still hyped on this Aaron Rodgers conversation. Another factor here that I think people need to remember is that, I see some people saying like, oh, look at his numbers in the playoffs when you add them all together. But look at his recent playoff output. I mean, this last year, this was everything lined up. You had a West Coast team coming in with Jimmy Garoppolo in the snow in Lambeau, one of the hardest places to play. It's one of the most storied places, and in your element, and you didn't throw a single touchdown, and you lost 13-10 in your crib without a playoff win. People have smashed Mike Tomlin for not winning the playoffs. This was another year. This would be a year where Mike Tomlin would be skewered for not winning with Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams. And again, he had a really good offensive line, a 1-2 punch, a running back that was really talented. Davante Adams, one of the best receivers in football, and a good defense. It was up there. They had good corner, they had good safeties, they had good linebackers, they brought heat. He had a good team around him, and he still didn't make it happen. I look at this, Jeff, and I say, man, like, are you really wanting to risk it for a guy who's lost to Jimmy Garoppolo twice in the last 3 years in the playoffs, along with Matt Ryan?
His playoff success has been his ultimate, or lack thereof, I should say, has been the ultimate bugaboo for his storied career. I mean, when you talk about MVPs, only I think Brady and Peyton Manning might have more.
Yeah.
And he's just been so good and so consistent. But the one thing that he doesn't have that all those quarterbacks that I just named are more Super Bowl wins. And it's not like he hasn't had the team around him. Like you said, I mean, that team was built to win last year. They kind of did what the Rams did, just more under the radar, and they didn't have the high name trades. And, they weren't trading like Matthew Stafford and Jalen Ramsey and then getting Von Miller midway through the season. Like, they didn't do it that way. But they built that roster and they put themselves in salary cap hell for that year. And when you don't even win a playoff game, and you can talk, you mentioned the offense and defense. Well, their special teams was their undoing in the postseason. But hey, that's part of the game. I mean, you got to win those areas as well. But he didn't do his job. Right. You only put up 13 points. You are one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. You have the pedigree. You're supposed to be able to overcome a few special team gaps and still win the football game. And they couldn't do it. And they weren't able to do it. And so Aaron Rodgers brings a lot to the table, some positive, some negative. And I think that Steeler fans, again, it's a name. It's a name. It's a big name. And there's a lot of people that love him. There's a lot of people that hate him. But Aaron Rodgers is a really good quarterback. But there's still a part of me that even if they were to pull off this trade, there's going to be something that outside of the cost, we know that would be so steep. There's a part of me that would also say, like, I'm really uneasy about this because of the lack of success when it matters. I mean, I guess it's kind of the way you feel with Ben at the end of his career. Like with Roethlisberger, you and I can speak of this because we used to do shows together when it was when Roethlisberger was in his prime. If they got the ball back with, I don't know, a minute 50 or less, even sometimes, and they had a couple timeouts, you're like, Ben's going to get the job done. And then there came a point where you're like, yeah, probably not going to get the job done.
Right.
It's sad. It saddens me to say that, but that's just reality. And I feel like we're entering that phase of Aaron Rodgers' career where you're saying there, I feel like their fan base is probably thinking, can he get the job done anymore? I mean, yeah, he's winning MVPs, but he's not winning Super Bowls. He's not bringing Lombardi trophies back to Green Bay. So what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? The guy's, like you said, going to be 39 years old when the season starts. Why would the Steelers want to jeopardize everything for that? I don't know.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense to throw away all for that. And again, I saw some people say, well, maybe the Broncos shouldn't have gotten Peyton Manning. Maybe the Buccaneers shouldn't have gotten Tom Brady. Those were both free agents that they were able to sign without losing a single draft pick. And they were able to use their high draft picks that they got because they had just stunk to invest and get really important players that played major roles on those Super Bowl teams. And I think, and that's the thing here. I get it. Aaron Rodgers is a very bright star, and Steelers fans are staring right at it. But what do they tell you? Jeff, they say, don't stare at the sun because eventually you're going to go blind. And what Steelers fans are doing right now is they're staring at Aaron Rodgers and they're becoming blind to all these other problems out here. And I want to talk about these problems because they're legitimate. Like you said, the Steelers had a good defense this past year. Wasn't anywhere near great. You know why? Because they couldn't stop the run to save their lives. That is one of the first things this team has to fix. And it's not just going to be a simple, Stephon Tuitt's back, great, everything's fixed. You need to make sure that defensive line has depth. And maybe they will. Maybe Tyson Alualu at 35 years old will be back and healthy and great and play the whole season. But that just seems like a bit of a gamble. I think that they still need to add at least one piece there. Make sure that Stephon Tuitt's actually coming back. We think he is. But you need another inside linebacker to work with Devin Bush. You need to make sure that there's someone who can move and hit and help against the run and be physical at the point of attack to balance with him. You also need to make sure that you have depth at edge rusher because we know that's where they went and got Melvin Ingram, and that's why they needed someone to fill that role this past season. And again, all that is still based off of still needing 2 cornerbacks, which is a very expensive position. You can't do all of that and fix all of those things if you're trading away 2 first-round picks and maybe more, because it took more than that to get Matt Stafford for the Rams this past year. You can't do all of that and get Aaron Rodgers and fix the offensive line that is terrible right now. And that's my problem here. But to me, Jeff, what is your biggest need? Like the biggest thing, if the Steelers knock out one concern this year, and they need to knock out like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But if they knock out one concern, what do you consider the thing that makes this offseason a victory?
Offensive line. Has to be the offensive line. Because I said it a million times on my show, and I know you've probably echoed it over here as well, and that is, I don't care what quarterback you put back there. If they're running for their lives, it means nothing.
Right.
And we saw Roethlisberger get rid of the football faster than him as anyone ever has in the last decade in 2 point whatever seconds. And there was a reason why. It's because he was going to be under duress pretty quickly. The defense, I feel like, there's hope that Tua does come back, that Alualu is able to kind of pick up the pieces. Chris Wormley being a rotational piece would still be very effective. I mean, he set a career high in sacks last year. Cornerback is a concern, but offensive line is paramount to me. Offensive line is where the running game with Najee Harris. I mean, we saw what he did last season, and that was with a really bad unit that couldn't even open many holes. And he was fighting for his life just to get back to the line of scrimmage sometimes. I just imagine in my head, what would it look like if he had some push? What if he had just a glimmer of hope? I mean, he'd be breaking off 6-7 yard runs on a clip, and it would be really fun to watch. We haven't seen that style of Steelers offense in a long time. But I think it's the offensive line, especially the interior offensive line. Center, guard. You got to hope Dotson is able to be healthy and come back, have his mind right. And so I'm hoping that both in free agency and the NFL draft, they're addressing the offensive line first. Get that shored up first, and then go and look elsewhere. I think if they can do that, and you can set your team up kind of like that 2003 team was for the Steelers. I'm not saying they're going to be 6-11 this year, but because they were 6-10 in 2003. But at the same time, if you're just one player away, it's so much easier, but they need to get to that point first. And so I think to me, it's interior offensive line for sure.
And I agree with that because, like you said, you want to dominate the line of scrimmage. That was one thing that, and think about it, Jeff, and we've talked about this a number of times. In all the great Steelers years, you've had a very good to great center when they won the Super Bowl, or even gone to the Super Bowl, whether it was Dermontti Dawson in the 90s when they had that crew, when it was Jeff Hardings of the 2005 team. Granted, 2008, different story. So I take it back. Not every single team. That offensive line was just poop. And there
was a Justin Hartwig.
Justin Hartwig. Oh man, those days. Him and Sean Mahan.
The safety in the Super Bowl. That's what I remember about him.
Exactly. The safety in the Super Bowl in 2008. And then also the pick six that Ben threw. I still say if Mahan just holds his man up just a little bit for a second longer, Ben lets that deep ball go. And it's not a pick six. It's maybe a touchdown bomb to Mike Wallace. And who knows how that Super Bowl goes.
Well, in 2010, it's Doug Legursky, not Marquise Pouncey, because Pouncey gets hurt at the end of the
got hurt. And that's what I'm saying. Those issues compounded, but you think of Marquise Pouncey helped get them there in 2010. Yeah. Jeff Harding, and then of course Dermontti Dawson, Mike Webster. Plenty of the great Steelers teams have revolved around. Even before Mike Webster came of age into the 70s team, you had Ray Mansfield. So it's always been part of the Steelers' creed to have a great center that was on the roster to try to propel things forward. And there's only one time they won a Super Bowl without that guy, without that kind of around, or even been to the Super Bowl without that kind of around. So I agree with you. That's a big part of what the Steelers need to do. They do need to get the offensive line together. And again, this is the direction they've been building in. This is why they drafted Najee Harris. This is why they've got Pat Fryman. This is why they've been paying defenders to stay around, because they knew that, hey, when Ben's done, unless someone falls into our lap, we're not just going to walk into a quarterback situation that we love. Maybe we'll do it in a year or two, maybe in 2, 3, 4 years. But this team is going to need to be about defense and running the ball. And if you need to be about defense and running the ball, one, you need a great defense, which means you're going to need to invest there. And two, you need a great offensive line, or even a good offensive line, because they were terrible last year. You need a good offensive line to have that charge. You already have the running back you want. You have a tight end that you like. You have a couple receivers that you like. Get yourself an offensive line. But again, to do those things and to be that identity, you cannot give up multiple first-round picks and potentially more, another second, another third, and give up all the cap space that you have now opened up by not having the longtime franchise quarterback who's 38 years older or more. You can't do all that if you have all those things on your roster, because then it stops you from investing in those things. So all I'm saying to Steelers fans is, I'm not saying that Aaron Rodgers wouldn't make the team better, but I'm saying that you'd have a better chance at winning a Super Bowl over the next decade if you kept building the defense, you built the offensive line, and you took your shot at getting your quarterback next year when those things were fixed. And if you do that and those things are fixed, then you set yourself up with a much larger window than what may be 2 years, but at least is just 1 year with Aaron Rodgers. And again, Aaron Rodgers with the Green Bay Packers, one of the storied organizations of the NFL, just like the Pittsburgh Steelers, he hasn't been back to the Super Bowl since the Steelers were in the Super Bowl. And that to me is just another sign. It's just, why gamble on that when you know you're building something special right there?
It's fantasy land, man. It's what I call the Madden and the mock draft simulator era. Everyone wants to play GM. Everyone thinks that these trades just go seamlessly and you're able to just, oh, that's okay. We'll just do this, that, and the other. It just doesn't work out that way. You live in reality. This is not the best decision for the team. It just isn't. That's just it. When you look at it from a realist lens, through that lens, and you take your black and gold goggles off for a second, you're going to see this would not be the best thing for the team. Not for now and not for the long term.
Exactly. It's just, there's so much more that needs to happen right now on this roster. We're done talking about this. The combine happened this weekend. Lots of amazing things happened. I'm not going to talk about the whole combine, but we are going to go over our mock draft Monday winner picks, and some of those picks have come from some impressive numbers at the combine. We'll talk about those right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I got to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net. Football season's maybe over, but basketball season is full steam ahead with the conference tournaments about to start this week, as well as the NCAA tournament itself, and of course the NBA is still going on. So from all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach might land, BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your best source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right down to even what happened to the NFL scouting combine. You could have made money off the combine. You're going to be able to make money off the NFL draft. Go to BetOnline.net. Get your chance to make money today. You can visit their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends and the action available to you at BetOnline.net, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jeff Hartman, BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Jeff, so we do this thing here we call Mock Draft Monday, and everyone has a Mock Draft Monday. Everyone does mock drafts all the way out. I save Mock Draft Monday for when after the Super Bowl is over, when there's no more football to be played, and then we start talking about mock drafts. So for those who are new to the show or may not know, you can participate in Mock Draft Monday. And Mock Draft Monday is simply a contest where you, the listeners, you go to our Locked On Steelers Facebook group, or you tweet at me at Carter Cortese on Twitter. You send me your mock draft. And if it's one that I think is interesting / realistic / something that, will generate a really cool conversation, I will take that mock draft and I will call it the winner of the week. And we'll go over and evaluate your picks and say, this is what we think of your draft. And we may not necessarily like all your draft, but there might be points of it that I think are the most important things to talk about right now. So, Jeff, without further ado, we're going to get to our Mock Draft Monday winner. Now I have to do these things that allow me to do that. There we go there. And there we go there. Our winner today is Dan. Oh, whoops, wrong one. So that was last week's. Dan Jakelis. I clicked on the wrong thing, man. But Dan Jakelis, congratulations. You are this week's Mock Draft Monday winner. Dan came out here, addressed offensive line with Zion Johnson, wide receiver with Christian Watson, linebacker with Channing Tindall, then went defensive line, safety, and running back for the later picks here. Now, this, of course, didn't include comp picks. He used the Draft Network. They don't include comp picks yet like Pro Football Focus does, and I believe Pro Football Network also does in their draft simulators. But we allow for some moving around here and what we're going to do. Jeff,
yeah,
at least for the 20th overall pick, going and getting Zion Johnson, the guard that may convert to center out of Boston College. What's your take on making that move?
Love it. I love that.
Right.
That's a pick that I'm definitely behind, because I just said earlier in the show, I want the Steelers to address the interior offensive line, both in free agency and the draft. And I would not be upset at all, one iota, if they do that at 20, especially with him. Everyone loves Linderbaum. I understand that. I don't think he's going to be available necessarily at 20 unless there's a run on some other positions. But Zion Johnson is a guy that the Steelers have met with at the combine. He's definitely he tested well from what I saw on little bits and pieces of it on Twitter. I'm not a huge combine guy myself, but still love the pick at 20. Absolutely love it.
Now, here's the thing. Zion Johnson didn't just test well. He was probably the best tester. He had the most bench reps at 32 of all offensive linemen. When you look at the 40-yard dash, we really don't care how much they run there. That's kind of like, when they run there, it is like, woo, that's pretty fast. But like Trevor Penning, big offensive tackle, ran a 4.89. That's ridiculous. If Trevor, that's also another sign to you. Like when people talk about, offensive linemen aren't athletes because they're just big dudes. Man, if a 330-pound man like Trevor Penning, who's like 6'8", if he was chasing you down and could run a 4.89 40-yard dash, you would be dead. There would be nothing you could do to save yourself. But that being said, Zion Johnson, he brought that there in the bench press, in the vertical leap, he was fourth. And when people say, well, what do you need about this vertical? The vertical isn't just about how high you jump; it's about how explosive you are in your lower body. Zion Johnson also had one of the best broad jumps of all offensive linemen this year at 9 feet and 4 inches. Those are the things that I look for. He also had one of the best 3 cones at 7.38 seconds, which deals with agility.
What are his measurables in terms of height, weight, arms, stuff like that?
Let me pull them up. Let me pull them up real quick. But remember, he was a guard that's good. That would be potentially moving to center with how they used him in the Senior Bowl. He's 6'3", 312 pounds with 34-inch arms, and his hand size is 10 5/8. So decent size. And that's official from the combine. Last year there was that issue with Kendrick Green where he was sold at 6'4", but he's really like 6'1" or 6 foot, and that was kind of like, so he's not Marquise Pouncey. But then again, that was last year because there was no combine. It was just pro days, and there was no central bank of information where the NFL, you came to the NFL, they got your measurements, and your school couldn't just make up some numbers about it. So Zion Johnson, those are good offensive, often center guard numbers. And this is a guy who's one of the most explosive of his class, the strongest of his class, and is showing pretty good jobs in the 3-cone drill and the 20-yard shuttle. That's on. And again, even if he doesn't go to center, even if they still believe that Kendrick Green's the guy, if he's your guy at right guard, you have him, Kevin Dotson, and you hope that Kendrick Green figures out. That can be a very physical group that can be starting its way towards fixing this offensive line. But Jeff, you talked about something that they're going to need to fix more than just that. We'll get to that in just a bit. I want to get your thoughts on the second pick from Dan here, our Mock Draft Monday winner, Christian Watson, the receiver out of North Dakota State. Watson was another guy, lit up the combine, and a lot of people, he went from maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick to people are talking about maybe he would sneak into the 1st round.
For me, like the receiver position is definitely a need for the Steelers. You look at the fact that I think there's a good chance Juju Smith-Schuster gets a decent payday somewhere else. James Washington's not coming back. We know that.
No.
If Ray McLeod comes back, he's not, in terms of like the industry, if you want to put that, he's not moving the needle. We'll put it that way. And so I didn't want the Steelers to have to go 2nd round receiver. I was hoping they could get some value in the 3rd because I do think Claypool and Deontay Johnson are still a good 1-2.
Yeah.
If you could get a 3rd and maybe get a veteran that's towards the end of their career, I would be happy with that. Because I just feel like there's some other needs other than receiver that would need to be addressed in the 2nd round. It's nothing against Watson. I do think that he is moving up those boards for a reason. But ultimately, when I look at mock drafts, and we get sent a lot of these on social media and stuff, the one thing I always look at is just positions. Like, I really want the Steelers to take a 2nd round receiver. And the answer for me is no. I don't want them going that route. Again, I think Watson's great. I do want them to address receiver, but I think it's a little early for me.
I also think that there's plenty of receivers in this draft that you can get in the 3rd and 4th rounds.
Very deep.
I mean, Alec Pierce, I didn't have that guy on my radar at all. I was like, maybe a 4th. He put himself in, maybe he's in the 2nd to 3rd round range. But to get back to Christian Watson, I like the idea of the pick, Dan Giacolis. Thank you for your pick. Christian Watson, 6'4", 208 pounds, runs a very good routes. You watch him in the Senior Bowl, you watch his tape, and you're like, wow, that guy could cut people up. So you got a guy with height, with that, and he runs a 4.36 in the 40-yard dash. Anytime you are at 4.40 or faster, you are lightning in my book. I'm not saying that 4.45 ain't fast of itself, but to compare, like Deontay Johnson is one of the best separators, and he's like a 4.56. He's somewhere in that range, but he ain't nowhere near what Christian Watson has in speed. This would be a prototypical wide receiver 1 for your team if you got him. And so I get the idea, but I'm kind of with with Jeff here, though, that you shouldn't just push away other opportunities for a wide receiver at this point, especially because you could get Travis Jones. You might be get one of those linebackers that could be fit in the class, but they did get a linebacker, and that was in the third round. Channing Tindall, linebacker out of Georgia. Now, here's the thing. Channing Tindall, another athletic guy that showed well in the combine. He had the highest vertical jump with 42 inches. He was up there in the broad jump. Now, for those people who not know what do we care about broad jump, the broad jump just shows your lower body explosiveness and the strength of your core to be able to just explode from one spot to leap that far to another. He came in fourth of all the linebackers behind Jeremiah Moon, Christian Harris, and Chad Muma. Actually, he was tied with Chad Muma, so he came in third. But you look at that, and that's an athletic dude. He also came third in the 40-yard dash of all linebackers in 4.47 seconds. That's a pretty good thing. Now, here's the thing is that you start to wonder how much of what his tape was because he just played for Georgia, because you had Quay Walker, you had Nakobe Dean, you had Jordan Davis, Devontae White, you had superstar on superstar guys that are going to be drafted before Channing Tindall. But Jeff, what's your thought on maybe this guy being a person who could be the number 2 guy next to Devin Bush?
Well, for me, I've always felt that the Devin Bush types, the Ryan Shazier types, they're best when they have someone next to them that is labeled a thumper. The Vince Williams type of linebacker that's going to be able to take on those linemen that if we saw it repeatedly. I mean, they were the 32nd rush defense for a reason last season. The Steelers were. That's because Joe Schobert and Devin Bush are kind of cut from the same cloth. They're not that big physical linebacker. They're more of the side to side, sideline to sideline, whatever you call it. They're going to run, they're going to track the play, all that stuff. I want to see someone, if they're going to take a linebacker that's going to show the ability. And I'm not saying I want Levon Kirkland. Okay. Like that. I'm not saying let's bring back the 90s with the,
those days are gone.
The horse. Hey, Levon Kirkland could move. But you still, could. Yeah. But I want someone that's a little bit bigger frame, more of a downhill, punishing type style linebacker. If he fits that bill, then I'm fine with it. I just don't want them picking another Devin Bush, because I don't think that's going to be I don't think that's what's going to be the cure-all or the fix for that defense, especially if offensive linemen are able to get to the second level, which we saw frequently in 2021.
Right, and that was a concern, and it's important to say that Tindall wasn't a full-time starter this past year. Again, he played on a superstar team, but he's a good tackler. He shows like he's a smart linebacker. He can compete there. He defends the run well, and he comes up, he makes big hits. But I do wonder how will he do with shedding blockers. That's going to be a question there for that. But still, getting a good athlete linebacker in the third round isn't a bad pick. Now, when it comes to the rest of the picks, this is where I was starting to be like, I'm not 100% certain, because I'm not going to lie to you. I haven't spent enough time studying any of these guys. We're still working on this guy. But the next pick in the fourth round was Ioma Uwazurike, I believe that's how you pronounce the name, of Iowa State, interior defensive lineman, 6 feet and 5 inches, 319. So a big guy from the Big 12 who comes in. And he's a run stuffer. He's a guy that's going to contribute as as a 3-4 defensive end, 4-3 defensive tackle. So he's a guy that could come in and you're saying, okay, you are on the second line of defense when Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Lulu are tired. You're out here on first and second down to go stuff the run. I get that if this is what this guy works out to be. He's very quick off the ball. I'm intrigued by that. And I do think at some point they need to get an interior defensive lineman. If you don't get Travis Jones or Jordan Davis or one of those guys in the first or second rounds, I think this is a safe place to try it there. I just got to be honest. I haven't spent a whole bunch of time on Uwazuriki's tape yet.
Well, my question is, how do you evaluate Isaiah Loudermilk going into year 2 of his career? Good question. Because if you think that he is going to develop into this same type of player, then why would you make this draft pick? And also Montravius Adams. Is that someone that the Steelers are going to be interested in bringing back? Because if you do that and you value Loudermilk, because he did play more than we all thought he would as a fifth round pick. I'm sorry. They traded into the 5th. Then I don't think this is a necessary selection. Again, we're all making the assumption it might be a little hasty that Stephon Tuitt will be back. And, Tyson Alualu is going to be healthy. And when he's healthy, he's still going to be able to be productive. This is a position where I'm looking at the 137th pick. I'm like, okay, unless you think Loudermilk is a bust and he's not what you thought he was, I feel like you either go for it all with the interior defensive line, or you just don't touch it until because you still have the Davis brothers as well on the roster.
Right.
And so this is one of those situations where I'm like, do they really want to invest another rookie, another player at a pretty deep position if everyone's available? That's just my only hesitation about this selection.
Hey, I feel you. I get that, because again, there's several different directions to go. You could go look at a bunch of different players, but I'm intrigued by the idea of adding to the defensive line. Just not sure when and where you do that. Like you said, Isaiah Loudermilk was improving. Not a guy I want to bank on, but if Tuitt's back and if Alualu's back, you don't have to bank on them. Those guys are depth pieces. You can just hope that they develop and then address defensive line the next year. I won't go over the other picks too much because they're seventh rounders, but Marquez Bell, safety out of Florida A&M, 6'2", good build, as far as having some size, but not again, safety, you're just hoping for another Trey Norwood situation there. And then Zonovan Knight, running back. I mean, they do need to find another answer that's not Benny Snell, and I do think that that's something that needs to get addressed. But Zonovan Knight out of NC State, an ACC running back, he ran for like 6,000 all-purpose yards. Cool, exciting. But again, 7th round picks, those are just darts at a dartboard even more than any other picks. So not too killing about there. But Dan Jakelis, congratulations on your mock draft Monday winning picks. Zion Johnson was, I think, your best pick here by far. Christian Watson, an athletic wide receiver. That's intriguing. Channing Tindall, the athletic linebacker, to pair with Devin Bush. Very interesting stuff with those first 3 picks, especially. Remember, if you want to get your picks on the Locked On Steelers podcast, you can do so anytime by checking out the Locked On Steelers Facebook page or my Twitter account at Carter Critiques on Friday, from Friday to Sunday. If you're submitting a mock draft, I'm looking at them, evaluating them, say, how could I work this into the show? If you're picked, you'll get announced, and you'll get the shout out at the show, right? Like our man Dan did today. Thanks again, Dan, for your contribution to everyone else's picks. Jeff, thank you for coming on the Locked On Steelers podcast. This was a great show. This is a lot of fun to always have you here, man. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get all of the work that you do.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. You can also follow the website at BT Steel Curtain. I am the editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, which is obviously a fan-driven Pittsburgh Steelers website. I'm the host of the Let's Ride podcast, which runs every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can get our full network of podcasts anywhere where you get your podcast just by searching Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain. You'll see it. Subscribe. Give it a listen. If you like this guy here, Chris Carter, you might enjoy my Let's Ride podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So check it out.
No, Jeff does great work. And Jeff and I, if you don't know, Jeff and I used to do our podcasts late at night after games. I still remember when after the Bengals playoff win, after all the craziness that was, when Ryan Shazier stripped Jeremy Hill, and then Pac-Man Jones and Vontaze Burfict just go berserk, and then they find a way to win. I remember going from my living room to my bedroom, turning on my computer and being like, what the heck just happened? And that was one of the funniest episodes we've ever done.
That was the Jerry Porter episode when
Jerry Porter, he was the man. Good times. But that's how Long and I, Jeff, go back for all those listening. So you're talking to real friends here, guys that enjoy talking with each other. Jeff, thank you so much for joining the Locked On Steelers podcast. Go check out everything he does at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and everything that platform does. They do an amazing work. That's where I got my start in sports. So if you want to see more of my work, at Carter Critiques on Twitter and Instagram, you can follow me there. You can check out this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you enjoy this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button to get all of our daily content. If you want to help out the show, give us a 5-star review with a positive comment on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out. And when you do, you get a shout out at the end of the show, like this person who calls themselves J Parker 233 with their 5-star review. It says, "Pod, I love this podcast. Carter's my man." Thank you so much, J Parker 233. You're my man too. Or woman. I'm assuming you're a man. I apologize. But thank you so much for your 5-star review. We'll give another shout out to the next one that we get here on the show. Thanks again for Jeff coming on. We'll be back on your screens and in your ears tomorrow with more on the Locked On Steelers podcast.